The bruises she learned to hide. The alarm clock screamed at 5:30, same as every morning, and I silenced it before the second beep could finish. Leon slept through everything when he'd been drinking, which meant most nights now. But sudden noises could wake him into the kind of mood that made the rest of my day unmanageable. I slipped out of bed with the practice of someone who'd learned to move like smoke, weightless and undetectable. The bathroom mirror offered its daily verdict under fluorescent lighting that forgave nothing. Fresh damage sat purple-blue across my cheekbone where his knuckles had connected after I'd suggested he slow down on the whiskey. An older bruise on my collarbone had faded to yellow-green. Almost healed, almost forgettable. The split in my lip had crusted overnight. I ran my tongue across it carefully, tasting copper. My makeup kit sat arranged in the order of application, a surgical procedure I'd perfected through repetition and necessity. Primer first, creating a barrier between skin and pigment. Then color corrector, green over red marks, orange over the purple, to neutralize the truth before covering it entirely. Foundation came next, 2 shades darker than my natural tone, applied with a damp sponge in thin, building layers. Pat, don't rub. Concealer under the eyes where exhaustion lived permanently. Powder to set everything in place so it wouldn't melt under the restaurant's heat or crack when I smiled for customers who never looked at me long enough to notice. I'd watched 3 tutorials online before getting it right. The makeup artist in the videos had been covering acne scars and hyperpigmentation. I'd adapted her technique for a different kind of damage. Breakfast was toast I didn't taste and coffee I drank standing at the counter. Leon had left beer bottles on the kitchen table, ashtrays overflowing despite my asking him to smoke on the balcony. I cleaned it all quietly, my movements efficient and small, erasing evidence of his presence before he woke and found new reasons to be angry. The apartment we shared had stopped feeling like mine 6 months into our relationship when he started deciding which friends I could see, which shifts I could work, which thoughts I was allowed to voice. I'd moved in with him because my roommate had gotten married and I couldn't afford rent alone. That decision felt like the edge of a cliff now, the moment before falling that stretched infinitely. My work bag held the essentials, an extra layer of foundation in case I sweated through the first application, ibuprofen for the headache that would arrive by hour 4, the small notebook where I tracked my savings in code he wouldn't recognize if he found it. $3,000 so far. I needed 8 to cover first month, last month, security deposit, and enough cushion to survive until I found steadier work. 5 more months at this pace. 5 more months of endurance, disguised as devotion. The emerald blouse hung in my closet, freshly laundered, sleeves long enough to hide the evidence. I dressed with the door locked, another small ritual of privacy in a life that had stopped belonging to me. When I looked in the full-length mirror, I saw what customers would see. A competent young woman with dark hair pulled back neatly, professional smile practiced and ready. Posture that suggested capability rather than fear. The bruises were invisible now. That was the goal. To move through the world without anyone asking questions I couldn't answer safely. To survive each day without drawing attention to the violence that waited for me at home. To save enough money in a tampon box hidden behind cleaning supplies until I could disappear into a future Leon didn't control. I checked my reflection one final time, adjusting the collar so it sat perfectly against my collarbone. The woman, staring back, looked whole. That was enough. I grabbed my keys and left before he could wake. The restaurant of Power Valentino's occupied the ground floor of a glass tower that reflected the city back at itself in distorted gold. The restaurant's entrance required passing through heavy brass doors that whispered wealth with every swing, stepping onto marble floors that had been imported from somewhere in Europe I'd never visit, and moving through a space designed to remind everyone exactly how much money separated the people dining here from the people serving them. I arrived through the service entrance in the alley, same as the other staff, where dumpsters and delivery trucks provided a more honest view of what kept the illusion running. The kitchen smelled like roasted garlic and seared meat, and the particular anxiety that lived in high-end establishments where a single mistake could cost someone their job. Chef Dominic ran his station like a general conducting warfare, his voice carrying over the clash of pans and the hiss of burners turned to maximum heat. The locker room was a narrow corridor with beige walls and fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly ill. I changed into my uniform. Black slacks, the emerald blouse, and the apron we all wore with the restaurant's name embroidered in gold thread across the chest. Sophia was already there, adjusting her hair in the mirror with the kind of casual confidence I used to possess before I learned that confidence could be beaten out of a person. "You look better," she said, glancing at me briefly. "Less dead." "New concealer," I replied, keeping my tone light. "Works miracles." She smiled, accepting the lie because the truth wasn't her responsibility. That was how it worked in places like this. Everyone performed their role, maintained their appearance, and nobody looked too closely at what existed beneath the surface. The restaurant didn't pay us to have problems. It paid us to be invisible until needed, flawless when visible, and gone the moment we were no longer required. The dining room transformed between afternoon and evening service. During the day, natural light poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, exposing every imperfection in the table settings and glassware. At night, the lights dimmed to a warm amber glow that softened edges and made even ordinary faces look distinguished. Candles flickered on every table. The chandeliers overhead cost more than most people earned in a year. Clusters of crystal that caught and scattered light like captured stars. Angelo, the maitre d', gathered us for the pre-service meeting near the host's stand. He was 50-something with silver hair and the kind of European accent that Americans found reassuring in expensive restaurants, though I'd heard him on the phone once speaking perfect, unaccented English to his daughter. "Table 16 has been reserved for Mr. Mercado and his associates," he announced, his gaze sweeping across the assembled servers. "This is a priority table. Discretion, efficiency, and absolute professionalism. Vivian, you'll be taking this section tonight." My stomach tightened. Priority tables meant important people, which meant higher tips, but also higher expectations and zero tolerance for mistakes. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral while my mind raced through every detail of proper service protocol. "The usual guests tonight," Angelo continued. "The Castellano family at table 4. Celebrating their daughter's engagement. The Brennan party at 8, corporate dinner, expense account. And several walk-ins, I expect, will be appropriately wealthy." He paused, smoothing his tie. "Remember, what happens at these tables stays at these tables. You see nothing. You hear nothing. You exist only to serve." We dispersed to our stations as the first reservations arrived. The dining room filled gradually with the kind of people who ate at Valentino's. Men in suits that cost more than my rent, women wearing jewelry that required insurance policies, couples who spent casually what I earned in a month. They spoke in low voices about business deals and vacations and problems that money could solve. I moved between tables with practiced efficiency, taking orders and delivering plates and refilling wine glasses. A ghost in emerald green who existed only in the margins of their consciousness. Here, appearances were currency. The food had to look perfect. The service had to feel invisible. And the servers had to seem whole, even when they weren't. Especially when they weren't. The man who watched Ralph Mercado arrived at 8:47, precisely 13 minutes before his reservation time, which suggested either military precision or the kind of confidence that didn't concern itself with other people's schedules. Angelo greeted him at the entrance with a deference I'd never seen him show anyone else. Not even the city councilman who dined here monthly or the tech executive who'd once left a $5,000 tip. I watched from my station near the bar as they exchanged words I couldn't hear. Angelo nodded repeatedly, his usual composure replaced with something approaching nervousness. He gestured toward table 16, the private alcove I'd spent the last 20 minutes preparing with obsessive attention to detail. Each wine glass positioned exactly 2 inches from the edge, each fork aligned with geometric precision, candles lit and burning at identical heights. Mercado moved through the dining room, and the space rearranged itself around him. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they lowered. People glanced up, registered his presence, and returned to their meals with a new awareness that someone significant had entered their orbit. He wore all black, suit, shirt, the thin gold chain at his throat the only concession to adornment. His hair was dark and perfectly styled, his face built from angles that photographs would love and that carried the particular handsomeness of men who'd never had to think about their appearance because it simply existed as fact. 2 men followed him, both younger, both carrying themselves with the careful posture of people who understood violence intimately. They were large in the way that suggested purpose rather than vanity, their suits tailored to accommodate builds that didn't come from casual gym memberships. Neither spoke. They simply flanked Mercado at a distance that felt protective without being obvious. Angelo led them to table 16, and I gave them 3 minutes before approaching, using the time to steady my breathing and check my reflection in the polished chrome of the espresso machine. My makeup held. My smile looked genuine. The bruise on my cheekbone was invisible under the layers of foundation and powder. When I crossed into the alcove, the temperature seemed to drop 5 degrees despite the candles. The 2 associates sat on either side, leaving Mercado at the center, positioned so he could see both the dining room entrance and the kitchen door. Strategic placement. I'd served enough wealthy men to recognize when someone was accustomed to watching exits. "Good evening," I said, settling into my professional voice, warm but not familiar, attentive but not intrusive. "My name is Vivian. I'll be taking care of you this evening. Can I start you with something to drink?" "Whiskey," one of the associates said. "Neat." "Same," said the other. Mercado's gaze found mine and held it. His eyes were so dark they looked black in the amber lighting, and they carried a weight I couldn't quite identify. Not hunger, not appraisal. Something closer to assessment, like he was reading information written in a language I didn't know I was speaking. "Water for now," he said. His voice matched everything else about him. Controlled, quiet, carrying authority without volume. And the menu. I distributed menus, filled water glasses from the crystal pitcher, recited the evening's specials with the practiced cadence of someone who'd performed this script 100 times. Mercado didn't look at his menu. He watched me instead, his attention so focused it felt physical, like standing too close to a heat source. "The ribeye is excellent tonight," I offered, trying to redirect his gaze toward the food. "Aged 45 days, prepared however you prefer." "I'm sure it is," he said, still watching me with that unreadable expression. "Give us a few minutes." I nodded and retreated, feeling his eyes on my back as I crossed the alcove threshold. When I glanced over my shoulder from the safety of the main dining room, he was still watching. Not leering, not aggressive, just observing with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world and knew how to use it. Sophia caught my arm as I passed. "That's Ralph Mercado," she whispered, her voice tight with something between fear and reverence. "Be very, very careful with that table." I didn't ask why. Some questions had answers I wasn't ready to hear. The moment of exposure, they ordered like men who'd eaten at places like this so often that the menu had become irrelevant. The associates chose steaks medium rare, sides of roasted vegetables, and truffled potatoes. Mercado requested the lamb, prepared simply, no modifications. He spoke precisely, economically, each word chosen with the same care most people reserved for legal documents. I transcribed their orders onto my notepad, nodded confirmation, and turned toward the kitchen. The dining room had reached maximum capacity, every table filled with the Saturday night crowd that came to be seen as much as to eat. I navigated between chairs and servers, balancing the mental catalog of 7 other tables that needed attention. Water refills at 4, dessert menus at 9, the check at 11 where the couple had been sitting in loaded silence for 20 minutes. The kitchen was controlled chaos. Chef Dominic barked orders in Italian accented English, while line cooks moved with synchronized precision, plating dishes that looked like edible architecture. I clipped my order ticket to the rail and grabbed the bottle of wine for table 8, a Barolo that cost $300 and that the hedge fund manager had ordered without checking the price. Marcus, one of the other servers, backed out of the kitchen entrance at the same moment I stepped forward. We collided with enough force that the wine bottle slipped from my grip. I caught it reflexively, twisting my body to prevent it from shattering against the tile, but the motion sent me stumbling sideways directly into the path of someone else. Strong hands caught my shoulders, steadying me before I could fall. The wine bottle remained secure against my chest, unbroken, my server's instinct to protect expensive inventory overriding my sense of balance. "I'm so sorry," I said automatically, looking up to find myself inches from Ralph Mercado. He'd left his table for reasons I couldn't immediately process. Restroom, phone call, something that had brought him into the narrow corridor between the dining room and kitchen exactly when I'd lost my footing. His hands remained on my shoulders, firm but not painful, holding me upright with the kind of strength that felt absolute. "You're fine," he said, his voice lower than it had been at the table, meant only for the small space between us. I stepped back, creating distance, but his right hand slid down my arm in a steadying gesture. His fingers brushed across my left wrist, where my sleeve had ridden up during the collision, exposing the bracelet of purple fingerprints Leon had left 2 nights ago when he'd grabbed me to prevent me from leaving during one of his rages. Mercado's hand stopped. His thumb rested against the bruises for less than 2 seconds, but time stretched and compressed around the contact. I watched his expression shift through something I couldn't name, recognition, maybe, or calculation. His dark eyes moved from my wrist to my face, studying me with the same focused attention he'd shown at the table. Except now there was context behind the observation. I pulled my arm back, gently, tugging the sleeve down to cover the evidence. "Thank you for catching me," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. That would have been an expensive accident. He released me completely, stepping back to give me space, but his gaze didn't leave my face. He was reading me again, cataloging information I couldn't control. The too careful way I held myself, the practiced smile that didn't reach my eyes, the instinctive flinch I'd barely suppressed when his hand had first touched my shoulder. "Be more careful," he said finally, the words carrying weight beyond their literal meaning. I nodded, hugging the wine bottle against my chest like armor. "Of course." Again, I apologized for the interruption. He didn't respond. He simply moved past me toward the restroom corridor, his presence leaving a void that felt almost physical. I stood there for 3 full seconds, my heart hammering against my ribs, before I forced myself to move. When I delivered his lamb, 20 minutes later, he didn't mention the collision. But he watched me differently now, with the specific attention of someone who'd seen past the foundation and powder to the truth beneath. Silent acknowledgement the rest of Table 16's dinner service unfolded with a precision that felt deliberate. Mercado didn't ask questions. He didn't comment on the collision or the bruises he'd seen. He simply ate his lamb with the same controlled attention he seemed to apply to everything, speaking occasionally to his associates in voices too low for me to hear, and watching me with an awareness that made my skin prickle each time I approached the alcove. When I cleared their entree plates, he said, "No dessert, just espresso." "Of course," I replied, keeping my movements efficient and professional. "And Vivian," he added, my name sounding different in his voice, weighted with intention. "Take your time. There's no rush tonight." I glanced at him, uncertain what the statement meant beyond its literal words. His expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes suggested the comment wasn't about coffee. I nodded and retreated to the espresso machine, my hands steadier than they should have been given the anxiety crawling up my spine. Sophia appeared beside me while I prepared 3 small cups. "What did he say to you?" "Nothing," I said. "Just ordered espresso. He's been watching you all night." She kept her voice low, glancing toward the alcove. "People like That don't watch servers unless there's a reason. I didn't have an answer that wouldn't invite more questions. So I focused on the espresso machine, steaming milk I didn't need just to have something to do with my hands. When the cups were ready, I arranged them on a small tray with sugar and cream neither of them would use, and carried everything back to table 16. The associates were discussing something in rapid Italian, their conversation stopping abruptly when I approached. Mercado leaned back in his chair, his jacket draped over the back, his posture relaxed but somehow still alert. The gold chain at his throat caught the candlelight. "Espresso," I said, distributing the cups. "Thank you." Mercado's fingers brushed mine as he accepted his cup, the contact brief and possibly accidental. Except nothing about this man seemed accidental. "You work here most nights?" The question landed like a stone in still water, creating ripples I couldn't quite track. "Thursday through Saturday," I said. "Sometimes Sundays." He nodded, filing the information away somewhere in that controlled mind. "Good to know." One of the associates glanced at him with an expression I couldn't read, something between confusion and understanding. Mercado ignored him, his attention remaining fixed on me. "Will there be anything else?" I asked. "No," he said. "Just the check when we're ready." I returned 15 minutes later with a leather portfolio containing a bill that would have covered my rent for 2 months. Mercado didn't look at it. He simply placed a black credit card inside and handed it back to me without checking the total. When I returned with the receipt, he'd already added a tip in cash. 5 crisp $100 bills folded inside the portfolio. "Thank you for your service," he said, his voice carrying the same quiet authority it had all evening. "Thank you." I managed, my professional mask slipping slightly at the absurd generosity. They stood to leave, the associates moving first, creating a path through the dining room. Mercado paused beside the table, adjusting his jacket with unhurried precision. He looked at me one final time, and in that moment something passed between us, not attraction exactly, but acknowledgement. He'd seen what I'd been hiding. He'd understood what it meant. And he'd chosen to respond with silence rather than questions. "Be safe getting home," he said quietly. The words felt heavier than they should have been, carrying implications I wasn't ready to examine. Before I could respond, he followed his associates toward the exit, moving through the dining room with the same commanding presence he'd brought with him. Angelo appeared at my elbow almost immediately. "How was the table?" "Fine," I said, still holding the portfolio with its impossible tip. "Professional." "Good." Angelo's relief was visible. "Mr. Mercado is important." "It's good he was satisfied." I nodded, watching through the windows as Mercado climbed into a black car that had been waiting at the curb. The vehicle pulled away smoothly, disappearing into the city's endless stream of traffic. My wrist still tingled where his thumb had pressed against the bruises. False calm, the $500 sat in my locker through the rest of my shift, folded inside my wallet where I checked on it twice between tables like it might disappear if I stopped confirming its existence. Money like that didn't come from normal customers. It came with expectations, obligations, strings I couldn't see but knew existed somewhere in the space between generosity and transaction. By the time I clocked out at 11:30, I'd convinced myself it meant nothing. Rich men tipped extravagantly all the time at Valentino's, especially when they were trying to impress associates or simply didn't care about money the way normal people did. The fact that Mercado had seen my bruises was coincidence, an accident born from a collision I hadn't planned and couldn't have prevented. His watching me throughout dinner was probably just his personality, intense, observant, the kind of man who paid attention to details because that's how men like him stayed powerful. The "be safe getting home" comment was basic politeness. Nothing more. I changed out of my uniform in the locker room, pulling on jeans and a sweatshirt, scrubbing the makeup from my face with cleansing wipes that left my skin raw and pink. Without the foundation, the bruise on my cheekbone bloomed purple-blue again, honest and ugly. I stared at it for a long moment before pulling my hair forward to partially obscure it. Sophia had already left. Most of the other servers had cleared out, eager to get home or continue their nights elsewhere. I walked through the empty kitchen where the prep cooks were breaking down stations, through the service corridor that smelled like industrial cleaner, and out into the alley where my car sat under a flickering streetlight. The drive home took 25 minutes through streets that grew progressively darker and less maintained the farther I got from downtown. My apartment building was a 4-story walk-up in a neighborhood that had been up and coming for a decade without ever quite arriving. I parked in my assigned spot and sat in the car for 3 full minutes, gathering the energy required to walk inside and face whatever mood Leon had cultivated during my absence. His truck was in the lot, kitchen light visible through our second-floor window. Both signs that he was awake, waiting, ready to catalog my lateness or my expression or whatever small infraction would justify tonight's grievances. I climbed the stairs slowly, keys already positioned between my fingers in a grip I'd learned from a self-defense article online. The hallway smelled like someone's cooking and old carpet. Our door was unlocked, which meant he wanted me to know he was awake. Leon sat on the couch with a beer in one hand and his phone in the other, the television playing some action movie he wasn't watching. He looked up when I entered, his eyes tracking my movement from door to kitchen with the calculated attention of someone performing an inspection. "You're late," he said. "Big party stayed past closing," I replied, setting my bag on the counter. "Couldn't leave until they finished." He grunted, apparently accepting the explanation. "You eat." "At work." "Make me something." I moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, assembling a sandwich from the groceries I'd bought 3 days ago, adding chips to the plate, delivering it to him without commentary. He took it without thanks, his attention already back on his phone. This was the false calm I'd learned to recognize, the quiet before some delayed detonation I couldn't predict or prevent. He'd find something eventually. A receipt I couldn't explain, a perceived slight in my tone. The fact that I existed in ways he couldn't completely control. But for now, in this moment, there was peace. I retreated to the bathroom and locked the door, turning on the shower to mask the sound of my breathing. The $500 was still in my wallet. I pulled it out and counted it again, then hid it inside the tampon box under the sink where Leon would never look. 3,500 now. Closer to freedom. Closer to gone. I told myself Ralph Mercado's tip changed nothing. It was just money. Just coincidence. Just one table on one night that I'd never see again. I almost believed it. The boyfriend appears Thursday night arrived with the inevitability of weather, bringing a slower crowd and a kind of exhaustion that had settled into my bones like permanent architecture. I'd worked 3 doubles in 4 days, banking hours and tips while Leon spiraled through moods I couldn't track. Silent resentment on Monday, explosive anger on Tuesday, false affection on Wednesday that felt more dangerous than the violence because it meant he was calculating something. The dining room held maybe 30 guests scattered across tables that looked too empty under the amber lighting. Angelo had sent 2 servers home early, leaving just Sophia and me to handle the reduced capacity. I was refilling water glasses at table 9 when I heard the commotion near the entrance. Leon's voice carried across the restaurant with the particular volume of someone who'd stopped caring about social conventions hours ago. "I'm looking for Vivian. My girlfriend. She works here." My stomach dropped. I set the water pitcher down carefully and turned toward the host stand where Angelo stood blocking Leon's path with a kind of diplomatic firmness that came from years of managing difficult customers. "Sir, if you'd like to wait at the bar, I can let her know you're here," Angelo was saying, his accent thicker than usual, a defensive measure he employed when dealing with Americans he didn't respect. "I don't want to wait at the fucking bar," Leon said, his words slurring slightly. "I want to see my girlfriend." He looked worse than he had this morning, disheveled, his shirt untucked, his face flushed with alcohol and rage. He swayed slightly, steadying himself against the host's stand, and I knew with absolute certainty that he'd been drinking since I left for work 6 hours ago. Sophia touched my arm. Want me to get Angelo to call someone? No, I said quickly, already moving toward the entrance. Calling security or the police would only make things worse later. I'll handle it. I crossed the dining room, aware of every eye tracking my movement. The wealthy diners whose peaceful evening I was interrupting with the spectacle of my personal disaster. Leon saw me approaching, and his expression shifted from anger to something uglier. Vindication, maybe, or the satisfaction of someone who'd proven a point. There she is, he announced to no one in particular. Working late again. Always working. Never home. Leon, you need to leave, I said quietly, positioning myself between him and the dining room. I'm working. We can talk when I get home. Talk. He laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. We don't talk anymore, Viv. You're too busy serving other people. Too busy making money you won't even spend on us. Please, I said, lowering my voice further. You're drunk. Just go home and sleep it off. His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, the same one Mercado had touched days ago, his fingers pressing into the faded bruises with deliberate pressure. Don't tell me what to do. You think because you work at some fancy restaurant you're better than me now. I never said that. I tried to pull free, but his grip tightened. Let go of her. Angelo's voice carried authority despite his smaller frame. Sir, I'm asking you to leave immediately, or I will call the police. Call them, Leon said, his attention still fixed on me. Tell them how my girlfriend's been sneaking around, hiding money, probably fucking her boss for extra tips. Heat flooded my face. The dining room had gone completely silent, every conversation suspended. Every patron watching the drama unfold with the uncomfortable fascination people showed toward violence they weren't experiencing themselves. That's not true, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Isn't it? Leon released my wrist and stepped closer, forcing me backward. Then where's all your money going, huh? You work 60 hours a week, but we can barely pay rent. Angelo moved between us, his small frame somehow creating a barrier. Sir, I'm calling the police now. Leon's eyes narrowed, calculating whether the confrontation was worth the rest. After a long moment, he stepped back, raising his hands in mock surrender. Fine, I'm leaving. But you, he pointed at me, you better be home within the hour. We're not done. He turned and stumbled toward the exit, shouldering past a couple entering for a late dinner. The brass doors swung shut behind him, and the silence in the dining room became suffocating. Angelo touched my shoulder gently. Take 5 minutes. Bathroom. Compose yourself. I nodded, unable to speak, and fled toward the back hallway where no one could see me fall apart. Taken into the dark, I made it through the rest of my shift on autopilot, smiling mechanically at the remaining tables, avoiding eye contact with customers who'd witnessed my humiliation. Angelo sent me home early at 10:15. His kindness somehow worse than judgment would have been. Sophia offered to walk me to my car, but I declined, needing the solitude to prepare for what waited at home. The parking lot behind Valentino's was poorly lit, shadows pooling between dumpsters and the brick wall that separated the restaurant from the neighboring building. My car sat in the far corner where I always parked to leave the closer spots for customers. I was halfway across the asphalt when Leon stepped out from behind a delivery truck. Took you long enough, he said. I stopped walking, calculating the distance between us, between me and my car, between this moment and escape. You shouldn't be here. Shouldn't I? He moved closer, and I caught the smell of whiskey sharp on his breath. My girlfriend works here. I have every right to pick her up. I have my own car. Not anymore. He held up my keys, dangling them from one finger. Found them in your purse. You left it in the front seat. Not very smart, Viv. My heart hammered against my ribs. I'd been so shaken after his scene in the restaurant that I'd forgotten to lock the car, forgotten my purse, forgotten everything except the need to get through the remaining hours without breaking down completely. Give me my keys, Leon. We need to talk first. He gestured toward the alley that ran behind the restaurant, a narrow corridor of darkness between buildings where the streetlights didn't reach. Privately, no. I stood my ground even as fear crawled up my spine. Whatever you want to say it here. His expression hardened. I'm trying to be reasonable. Don't make this difficult. I'm not going back there with you. He closed the distance between us in 3 strides, his hand clamping around my upper arm with bruising force. Yes, you are. I tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. He dragged me toward the alley, and I dug my heels into the asphalt, my free hand clawing at his wrist. Let go of me. Shut up, he hissed, yanking me harder. You've embarrassed me enough for one night. We crossed into the alley's darkness, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The brick walls rose on either side, trapping us in a corridor barely wide enough for one person. The sounds from the street felt distant, muffled, belonging to a world that had stopped including me. Leon shoved me against the wall hard enough that my head cracked against brick. Stars exploded across my vision. His forearm pressed against my throat, not quite cutting off air, but making breathing difficult. You think you can disrespect me? His face was inches from mine, his breath hot and sour. Make me look like a fool in front of all those people. I didn't, I gasped, trying to push him away. You did. His free hand grabbed my jaw, forcing me to look at him. You've been acting different, secretive, hiding things. Where's the money going, Vivian? There's no money. His fist connected with my ribs, and the air left my lungs in a rush. I doubled over, but his arm at my throat kept me pinned upright against the wall. Pain radiated through my torso, sharp and immediate. Don't lie to me, he said, his voice dropping to something quieter and infinitely more dangerous. I know you're planning something. You think I'm stupid? You think I don't notice you pulling away? Leon, please. Please what? He hit me again, same spot, and I felt something crack. Please stop. Please leave you alone so you can run off with whatever money you've been hiding. Tears streamed down my face, hot and useless. I couldn't breathe properly, couldn't think past the pain blooming across my ribs, and the terror that this time he wouldn't stop. This time he'd go too far, and I'd become another statistic, another woman who didn't leave in time. His hand moved to my throat, squeezing. The world started to narrow, darkness creeping in from the edges of my vision. Through the growing haze, I saw his face, twisted with rage and satisfaction, and something that looked almost like grief. This was how it ended. In an alley behind the restaurant where I'd tried so hard to hide the truth. Alone with the man I'd once trusted, dying because I'd waited too long to run. Then his weight disappeared. Gone by morning, air flooded back into my lungs in a painful rush. I collapsed against the brick wall, coughing, my hands at my throat where Leon's fingers had been seconds ago. Through watering eyes, I watched him fly backward as if pulled by invisible cables, his body slamming into the opposite wall with enough force to crack his head against the brick. Ralph Mercado stood between us. He'd appeared from nowhere. No footsteps, no warning. Just sudden presence, like a storm materializing from clear sky. He wore all black again, nearly invisible in the alley's darkness except for the gold chain at his throat catching ambient light from the distant street. One hand gripped Leon's shirt, holding him pinned against the wall 2 feet off the ground. Leon struggled, his feet kicking uselessly. Who the fuck? Mercado's fist connected with Leon's jaw, and the rest of the sentence died in a wet crunch of bone meeting bone. Leon's head snapped sideways. Blood sprayed from his mouth, dark in the shadows. Don't speak, Mercado said quietly. His voice carried no anger, no emotion at all, just absolute authority. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't support me. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the filthy asphalt, watching through a haze of pain and shock as Mercado methodically destroyed the man who'd been strangling me 30 seconds ago. Another punch. Leon's nose broke with an audible crack. You like putting your hands on women? Mercado's tone remained conversational, almost curious. Makes you feel powerful. Leon gurgled something that might have been a plea or a curse. Mercado hit him again, this time in the ribs, the same spot Leon had targeted on me. The symmetry felt intentional. One of Mercado's associates appeared at the alley entrance, the larger of the two from the restaurant, his frame blocking what little light reached us from the street. He said something in Italian I didn't understand. Mercado responded without looking away from Leon, his voice still carrying that terrible calm. Please, Leon managed through broken teeth and blood. I didn't, she's not yours, Mercado said and hit him again. I should have felt something. Horror, fear, even satisfaction. Instead, I felt numb, disconnected, watching violence unfold like it was happening on a screen rather than 10 feet away. My throat ached. My ribs throbbed. My head pounded where it had struck the wall. The pain anchored me to reality even as reality stopped making sense. Mercado released Leon and he crumpled to the ground like a puppet with cut strings. Mercado crouched beside him, speaking too quietly for me to hear. Whatever he said made Leon's eyes go wide with a fear that transcended physical pain. Then Mercado stood and turned to me. His knuckles were bleeding. His perfectly styled hair had fallen slightly forward. Otherwise, he looked exactly as he had in the restaurant, controlled, composed, a man who'd just beaten another man unconscious with the same efficiency he brought to ordering dinner. Can you stand? He asked. I tried again, and this time my legs cooperated enough to get me upright, though I had to lean against the wall for support. Why are you? I was having dinner across the street, he said, which didn't answer either question. Saw him follow you out. The associate appeared at Mercado's shoulder, speaking rapid Italian. Mercado nodded, his attention still fixed on me. My car is at the curb. You need a hospital. I need to go home. No. The single word carried finality. You're not going anywhere near the place you shared with him. My things will handle it. He stepped closer, his hand reaching toward my face but stopping before making contact, asking permission. When I didn't pull away, his fingers gently tilted my chin up, examining my throat where Leon's hands had left marks. His jaw tightened, the first real emotion I'd seen break through his control. Behind him, the associate was speaking on his phone, his voice low and businesslike. I heard words I recognized: cleanup, disposal, permanent. What are you going to do with him? I whispered. Mercado's dark eyes met mine. Nothing you need to worry about. By morning, he'll be gone. Gone where? Just gone. He released my chin and offered his hand. Come, you're safe now. I looked at his outstretched hand, then at Leon's motionless form on the ground, then back at the man who'd saved my life with brutal efficiency. Every instinct I developed over 18 months screamed that accepting help from someone like Ralph Mercado came with costs I couldn't calculate. But Leon had been killing me slowly for over a year, and this man had stopped it in under 3 minutes. I took his hand. After the fear, the hospital was private, discreet, the kind of facility where questions weren't asked and records could disappear if the right person made the request. A doctor with kind eyes and careful hands examined my injuries in a room that smelled like antiseptic and expensive cologne. Bruised ribs, not broken. Contusions on my throat that would fade in a week. Minor concussion. Nothing permanent, nothing that wouldn't heal. You were lucky, the doctor said, which felt like the wrong word for what had happened in that alley. Mercado waited in the hallway, making phone calls in Italian, while his associate stood guard at the door. When the doctor finished and left me alone to dress, I stared at my reflection in the small mirror above the sink. Without makeup, every bruise was visible. Old ones fading yellow, new ones blooming purple. A complete map of violence written across my skin. For the first time in 18 months, I didn't try to hide them. Mercado drove me to a hotel downtown, the kind with a doorman and marble floors and room rates I couldn't afford with a month's wages. He didn't ask if I wanted to go. He simply took me there, his associate following in a second car, and walked me through a lobby where staff nodded at him with recognition and respect. The suite he led me to occupied the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, lights stretching to the horizon like earthbound stars. The space was larger than my entire apartment, furnished with the kind of understated luxury that whispered wealth rather than shouting it. "You'll stay here," Mercado said, setting my purse, retrieved from my car by his associate, on the glass coffee table. "Everything you need will be provided. If you want anything else, call the front desk and tell them you're my guest." I stood in the center of the room, suddenly aware of how small I felt in this space, how out of place. "I can't afford this. You're not paying." He moved to the bar and poured 2 glasses of water, bringing one to me. "Drink. Doctor's orders." I accepted the glass, but didn't drink immediately. "Why are you doing this?" "Because someone should have done it sooner." He sat in one of the leather chairs, gesturing for me to sit as well. When I remained standing, he didn't push. "Your things from the apartment will be delivered tomorrow. My people are collecting them now." "Leon is gone," he said, the same finality he'd used in the alley. "You won't see him again. He won't contact you. He won't come looking for you. That part of your life is finished." The certainty in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it felt like absolution. I sank onto the couch, my body finally acknowledging its exhaustion. "I don't understand why you care." Mercado was quiet for a long moment, studying me with those dark, unreadable eyes. "My mother had bruises like yours," he said finally. "My father put them there for 15 years before someone stopped him. No one helped her. No one intervened. She died believing she deserved it." The air between us grew heavy with shared understanding. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be free." He stood, smoothing his jacket. "There's money in the safe. The combination is written on the notepad by the phone. Use it for whatever you need, new apartment, deposit, expenses. Consider it payment for services rendered at the restaurant." "That's too much. It's nothing." He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "You have my number now. It's programmed in the phone on the nightstand. If you need anything, protection resources help call. Day or night. I don't want to owe you. You don't." His expression softened almost imperceptibly. What happened tonight wasn't a transaction. It was simply the right thing to do. He left before I could respond, the door closing behind him with a quiet click that sounded like punctuation at the end of a sentence I'd been trapped in for too long. I sat alone in the suite with its impossible luxury and its view of a city that had witnessed my suffering without intervening. My throat ached. My ribs throbbed. My head pounded. But underneath the pain, something else was growing. Something I hadn't felt in so long I barely recognized it. Hope. I walked to the windows and pressed my hand against the glass, feeling the cool surface against my palm. Somewhere out there, Leon was gone. Erased. Made irrelevant by a man with dark eyes and controlled violence, and a history that made him unable to look away when he saw bruises on a stranger's wrist. I was safe. I was believed. I was finally impossibly free. The sun would rise in a few hours on a life that belonged to me again. I didn't know what that life would look like. Didn't know if I could trust the man who'd given it back to me. Didn't know anything except this single, crystalline truth. I was still here, still breathing, still alive, and that was enough.